From the dawn of civilization, many societies have developed extractive institutions in the forms of tyrants and despots to rule over their peoples. However, societies that have used inclusive institutions to govern its citizens have been lauded as beacons of development and prosperity. As societies with an inclusive institution seek to foster wealth creation for all of its citizens, while those in extractive institutions have a legacy of theft and oppression, thus stealing any meaningful gains in economic production.
At the end of World War II, an Iron Curtain had descended across Europe. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics had sought to dominate and oppress the freedom-loving people of Europe, from Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic. Their disastrous economic policies have left scars as Eastern Europe continues to play catch-up with the Western world. Only when a society guarantees basic freedoms and rights can economic growth follow. While inclusive institutions do not assure economic prosperity, they are a necessity towards achieving it.
We now know that nations with institutions that create the opportunities for individual growth have strong property rights, rule of law, equality of all individuals before the law, and free competitive elections. These policies create incentive structures that allow innovators and risk takers to be rewarded. Nations that fail to achieve these policies will face economic stagnation due to the lack of incentives citizens have for innovation and investment.
The reason is that the ruling elites are afraid of creative destruction, which is the ongoing process of annihilating old and bad institutions while generating new and good ones. Creative destruction would fabricate new groups which would compete for power against ruling elites, who in turn would lose their exclusive access to a country's economic and financial resources.
Look at the nation of the USSR. The government created and supported extractive political institutions where freedom thought was suppressed and extractive economic institutions by which the people were restricted from selling goods and services on the market. These extractive institutions resulted in a time of economic decline. Wages stagnated, prices rose, quality and quantity of goods fell, and innovation was squashed.
Now, it's true that the Soviet Union achieved rapid industrialization through a regime of heavy saving and investment, but this growth strategy petered out by the 70s. Why did Soviet growth slow dramatically? It was simply not possible for the Soviet economies to sustain the rates of growth of labor force participation, average education levels, and above all, the physical capital stock that had prevailed in previous years. Mere increases in inputs without an increase in the efficiency with which those inputs are used must run into diminishing returns. Input-driven growth is inevitably limited.
How then have today's nations been able to achieve sustained growth in per capita income? The answer is that technological advances had led to a continual increase in total factor productivity. The rate of efficiency growth was not only unspectacular, it was well below the rates achieved by Western economies. Perhaps the greatest virtue of the market system is that no single individual is in charge of the economy, so no one has to contrive solutions to the challenges that continually arise.
The early strength of the Soviet system became its greatest weakness as the economy stopped growing because of the failure of imagination at the top to introduce new technological capital, the finite amount of old catch-up capital that could be introduced into an economy, and the lack of an incentive structure that allowed talents and creative ideas to be rewarded.
Stalinist planners had moved millions of workers from farms to cities, pursued massive programs of education, and above all, plowed an ever-growing proportion of the country's industrial output back into construction of new factories. The Soviet economy had a special strength, its ability to mobilize resources, not its ability to use them efficiently. By disrespecting the property rights of private citizens, the people of the nation were unable to thrive through the faltering economy due to the uncertainty that the government created through their tyranny.
Just as all of the problems that faced long-run Soviet economic growth can be identified in real life, so can they be identified in George Orwell's Animal Farm. With the takeover of the animal farm by Napoleon, a representative of Stalin, the pigs, who represent the Communist elite party membership, become more wealthy throughout the course of the book, even though their farm eventually stagnates in production. The pigs have created a system in which they have more rights and privileges than the other animals. They use these privileges to steal goods that the workers produce, sell them, and pocket the vast majority of the profit. Their repeated and widespread theft of the goods produced demoralizes most of the animals, who now work the bare minimum to survive, as the workers who try and work harder than is needed for personal survival, i.e. Boxer, are rewarded with broken bodies, and in Boxer's case, being sold to a glue factory once his body can no longer function.
The use of the political and economic institution for extractive purposes by Napoleon and his loyalist pigs benefits only them. The rest of the animals on the farm are forced to live in extreme poverty, with demanding working hours, and in fear of their own government, which claimed to have liberated them from the harsh dictatorship of Mr. Jones. Just as the use of extractive institution by Mr. Jones, a representative of Tsar Nicholas II, impoverished the animals before the revolution. The use of economic and political institutions to extract wealth by Napoleon after the revolution caused mass poverty and the creation of a huge, permanent lower class of animals.
In conclusion, economic prosperity depends above all on the inclusiveness of economic and political institutions. Institutions are inclusive when many people have a say in political decision-making. In contrast, extractive institutions permit the elite to rule over and exploit others. Nations with a history of extractive institutions have not prospered because entrepreneurs and citizens have less incentive to invest and innovate due to ruling elite's fear of creative destruction.